Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the pod. I'm Mike Shredder. I'm joined by my cousin, Charlotte Dellin, and new Trier product. So, for those who know Illinois sports, everyone knows that New Trier is very good at sports. Charlotte, we're going to talk a little bit about today. It's just she came off a magical senior year state tournament run. And I think this has been a long time coming to get her on the pod. So I'm glad to have her on. So first of all, Charlotte, thank you so much for joining and so appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you for having me. Super excited.
Absolutely. So first of all, before I get into anything related to senior year, because there's a lot of material to cover there, I want the viewers to get a little bit of an understanding of, why did you choose to pursue soccer, like about something that you really loved and where that
Mhm.
passion stemmed from?
Yeah, I mean, I've played a ton of sports like my whole life growing up. Like we're a pretty athletic family, so I think those genes kind of kicked in like as soon as I could walk. So I've played like soccer, basketball, field hockey, lacrosse. I did cross country for a while. I did multiple other sports too, and it was just like soccer and basketball were always my two that like growing up, they were the two that I think one I was probably the best at, and two, I just enjoyed the most. And honestly, when it comes to soccer, like the thing I think that really kind of put me on a path to make that my number one sport, because like soccer and basketball were always pretty tied up, I want to say, growing up until like freshman year. I think it was like COVID and me not being able to play AAU basketball and me being able to play like sort of remote but like social distance club soccer. I think that was kind of just like the turning point in my decision there to pursue soccer further on.
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit then about the competitiveness of the opponents you play at New Trier? Before we get into anything state tournament related, obviously those people who know New Trier sports generally, like you guys are playing against the cream of the crop of Illinois, Chicago area high school
Mm-hmm.
teams. And how do you think that helped you kind of grow your soccer skills and maybe your leadership qualities as well in playing in that type of environment?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, over the 4 years of high school that I kind of just got to experience neutral sports, like the area that we live in, all the schools around are relative, like they have great athletes. And I think that is kind of what helps, like a difference between like high school and club sports is for like high school sports, everyone is wanting to play their hardest. Everyone is wanting to win because they're playing for other people. They're playing for their teammates. They're playing for their coaches. It just like there's kind of a whole different culture to it. And I think all the schools around my area take that to heart and really put that into their play. So it makes everything really competitive, which is awesome.
Yes, now let's shift over a little bit to the senior year in a sense, right? So you have kind of like the fall season, which is more club related, and spring, which is more of your school. Before we
Mm-hmm.
get into anything, obviously with the state tournament run, can you talk a little bit about like what the differences are in terms of playing for a club team
Yeah.
and the demands of that and playing for your school team and how you're able to balance everything else outside of just those realms of soccer play?
Yeah, for sure. I want to say for club, it's a little bit, it depends on what level you play at, because there are different leagues and different stuff. Like club soccer in the United States for girls is very complicated. So, depending on what like league you play in, kind of dictates the competitiveness of like your team in general and the people that you play against. So, there's this league called GA that my club has had like throughout my entire upbringing. But the thing is with GA is that you weren't up until this year allowed to play high school soccer. So I did not partake in that because I wanted to play high school. Um, so that kind of just meant like my club trainings and my club games and stuff weren't as competitive, but it was always super fun. Like I always had great friends on my club teams. But then it was kind of a culture shock when I got to high school soccer, because everyone is just so competitive, especially at my school. Like it's just always my coach demands excellence. So we're always playing at a high level of play. Like even if we're doing like choreography and practice, like everyone's locked in, everyone's focused because everyone wants to do the best for like the people around them. So it's kind of just like really, I don't know, and people just really take in that culture and like really make it a thing. Like they want to keep it going.
Mhm.
So it's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds very different than I would say the AAU
Yeah.
experience for me. It's very different. I
Yeah.
would say it's for me it was kind of the opposite, where like AAU
Mhm.
was a little bit more of the competitive aspect, just
Yeah.
because that's where all the recruiting is, and so that's an
Mhm.
interesting dynamic. I would love to just ask though, from a senior year standpoint, you guys had your state tournament run,
Mhm.
which uh, from what it sounded like, obviously you guys have built success, but it was kind of almost like incredible how well it went, the
Mhm.
chemistry you guys were able to have, like the successes. I
Mhm.
mean, didn't you have, I'm pretty sure you had one game that went like 3 overtimes, if I'm mistaken,
It,
correctly?
our state championship game, we had 2 overtimes and penalty kicks, which was crazy. That entire game in general was just honestly mind blowing.
Yeah. So my question with that is just how do you personally maintain not just like the physical endurance to be able to withstand that, but
Mhm.
I would say also the mental endurance, because the mental endurance, as we know, it's hard, and that might be harder.
Mhm.
So with all the games that you were playing, because it seemed like it was kind of like back to back to back to back games, how
Mhm.
did you stay physically and mentally locked in where you knew you had to go out and perform at a high level?
I mean, honestly, the mental part to it, it kind of, I think it really came with having a lot of experience, like the experience that I've had, because I've been starting on my high school team since I was a freshman, so kind of just to be able to have that experience to know what a overtime playoff game is like, to know what PKs are like, just to have that experience in general, I think it definitely gave the seniors who are on the field who have that experience that upper hand. And then the physical side of it, like my team just does a bunch of conditioning, or at least we did this year. So that definitely helped because I feel like going into overtime and stuff, like we were probably the more fit team there. So that also allowed for our mental switch to kind of like stay on.
So with that, right, you guys went on your run. Can you talk a little bit about just kind of, recap it in a sense of just, the games themselves,
Mm-hmm.
especially just getting to that state championship game. Just
Right.
like for the people maybe who didn't follow it,
Mm-hmm.
who'd you play against, how the games go, kind of give like a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of synopsis, and I can ask some questions off of that.
Right. So the first we had the way that Illinois does their state runs in general is we have a regional round, a sectional round, a super sectional, and then the state finals weekend. The regionals, it's 2 games. And the first game, at least at the level that we're playing at, it's usually kind of just like a warm-up sort of game, I guess. But we played a team called Sen, or from a school called Sen. And we won 9-0. And then the second game we played Niles North, and that was, I think, if we were to get shocked early in the state tournament, like they would have been it. They have really good players. Like they have a girl who's going to Virginia Tech, who I've played with before. Um, just great players all around. But we ended up beating them 7-0. And then our sectional semifinal was against our school's like complete and total rival Loyola Academy, and we beat them 2-0. Then our sectional final, we played Lane Tech, which is a city school. Great team. We won 2-0. And then our super sectional, in my career at New Trier, I have been to 2 super sectionals before that, and we had lost in double overtime in both of those. So the super sectional was definitely for the 4-year varsity seniors, like that was kind of our moment that it's like, okay, we have to prove ourselves here. So we were playing a great Lyons Township team, and we won 1-0. And then by winning that, we made it to state. So our state semifinal, we won 2-1 versus a downstate team called Evansville. And then our state championship was 3-3 at the end of regulation and overtimes. And then we went into PKs and we won 5-4. I'm almost positive.
Yeah. So can you talk about like this, like those games themselves, very different scores, obviously very different opponents.
Hmm.
What went into I'm obviously not going to ask for like team strategy, but
Hmm.
in terms of like individually, right? That last game especially was a high scoring game,
Hmm.
live overtimes, right? You're a senior, which comes with a lot of, I always like to bring it back to leadership
Hmm.
responsibilities here. How were you guys able to, from an upperclassman, how were you guys able to get the team to be confident enough when you guys got to those overtimes, got to
Hmm.
those PKs? Because the game is going very back and forth,
Right.
right? Obviously, as I know, like the weather, different weather games, the weather was
Horrible.
crazy for a lot of this stuff. So can you talk a little bit about just how you guys, from an upperclassman standpoint, kept the team prepared, but also how
Mhm.
your coach did too? Because your coach obviously is fantastic and has put a lot of effort into that as well.
Right. So at least from the upperclassmen perspective, like one thing that I think really helped our team going into the overtimes was one of my teammates and senior Annie Payton. She just said to everyone, like, oh guys, this just means we get 20 more minutes together. And like our team is incredibly close. So I think that definitely kind of put a different perspective into people's heads. Like instead of being like, oh no, like we got to play 20 more minutes, like we just let up that lead, whatever. It kind of just went to, okay, like we just get to play soccer with each other for 20 more minutes, like do what we've done all season and we should be fine. And then my coach is amazing. He's been doing this for a long time, 28 years, I think. And so he has a lot of experience with he's had a lot of these games where they've gone into overtimes, like state championship games, all that jazz. So he just, with that experience, talked logistics and whatnot, like passing down his knowledge to us and like the people who hadn't experienced a state championship yet.
So with that, then, right, you talked about the closeness of the team that you were on. Where did that develop? Like, you guys getting great team chemistry, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of high school teams don't have that, and
Mm-hmm.
that really can make or break. Even college and professional teams don't have that.
Right.
How, I mean, was it something that was instilled day one? Was it like these were your friends growing up and you were actually close? Like, can you talk a little bit about just like how you were able to develop chemistry and how important that is for a sport like soccer where everyone has to be so connected?
Mm-hmm. It was definitely interesting coming into this year because one thing that my coach said on the very first night, like when everyone made the team, was that our singular team was compiled of girls from 13 different club teams. So it's a bunch of people coming in from very different cultures, very different styles of play. Like everyone had a different experience up until that point. And our big thing this year was that we had to come in from a place of trust. Like it wasn't a thing where high school season, it's a short season, it's 3 months. It's not like club where you're basically there all year round and like you have the time to build the trust with your teammates and stuff. So our coach the very first night he was like, with our trust, we need to start up here instead of down here and gradually building it. Like you can lose trust at times, but we need to start as high as possible. So that was honestly, that was really inspiring, I think, to everyone. And just the fact that like New Tree Girls soccer in general, like the culture is fantastic. Like my coach has created an incredible program, incredible team. And I think just over the years, like it's kind of just built into this thing where everybody's excited to come in and join this team. So they're all excited and they're willing to kind of open up to people and just open up to the culture in general and really build that closeness.
Yeah. And what for you, obviously in your 4 years, what has been something that you maybe the state run taught you about yourself
Mm-hmm.
individually? Because maybe you've learned stuff about yourself through fighting through injuries, through different club experiences you've had, through obviously like the recruiting process. But what did you learn about yourself as an individual through going through these massive battles and being able to build an incredible success in your last year? What did you learn about yourself?
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that was definitely something that I realized about myself kind of early on in my freshman season, like freshman, sophomore, junior year, I'd say we're all pretty like compiled up in the same thing. But one thing that I think I really noticed from that was that I like to think I'm a pretty mentally tough person, but when it comes down to the games where it's like, oh, you're really grinding out like these last 20 minutes, like that's when you kind of realize like just how mentally tough you are. And I think that was definitely something that I think gave me confidence going into my senior year, knowing that I was that I had that ability. And also just like playing wise, I realized that I can't think too much because especially in the state tournament, like you lose one game, you're done, like your season's over. So you just can't think too much about like the little things, the mistakes you may have made, the touches you may have had. You kind of just need to go out and play and just trust that the people around you have your back and that you're going to have your own back as well. So those two things I think were big ones that I learned about myself.
Yeah, well, this one's gonna be an obvious question, but it's one I'm gonna ask. Just, what were the emotions after winning that brutal double overtime PK 5-4 offensive shootout? Like, what were the emotions that you felt? Obviously, there's probably to be a lot of joy in it, but just like obviously, it's
Mm-hmm.
a culmination of everything that you put into the season. Can you talk
Right.
a bit about just like your emotions and just like what you felt
Yeah.
after everything was accomplished in a really successful manner?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I definitely, obviously, like my goalie makes that last save, like we're all running out to her, everyone's just screaming, like that is just pure joy. And then like when you really come to think about it, like just being at the place where I was at as a senior and that being my first state championship, like I had never experienced that in any other sport before either. It was kind of just like I felt an incredible amount of like pride and gratitude and just I was definitely prideful because like my team the past 3 years we hadn't made it that far, so just to be able to kind of really prove that like the post COVID new career could make it over a super sectional hump was definitely, I think it was just so there was so much relief involved in my opinion, like so much relief, but just like complete joy overall.
Yeah. Last question for you is just what has it meant to grow up playing soccer in Illinois in the Midwest, and how do you think that's helped you? I mean, I don't know how much exposure. I mean, I feel like from through camps and stuff like that, you've been exposed to the East Coast and West Coast probably.
Mm-hmm.
But how much
Mm-hmm.
is it just like, the importance of just like, growing up where you have, playing in like that competitive environment, growing up in the Midwest type of thing? Like, how do you think that shaped you in a positive way?
I mean, honestly, I think it's made me a pretty physical player because I can say that Midwest girls are definitely very physical when it comes to soccer. Like, it's kind of just taught me to be able to hold my own. But I mean, just the people that it's really been the people that I've met, I think that have really shaped me into like the soccer player that I am today, and the person. But honestly, it's like really the people along the way who I give credit to that has shaped me.
Last question for you. Obviously, I have to bring them up. Obviously your mom was, a Division I field hockey player, and your dad's someone who played sports, also loves every aspect of it. And you could definitely talk about their support. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously from Charlotte, not Charlotte, sorry, Caroline, excuse me, and Jack, their support as well. Can you talk a little bit about just like your family support for you during this time? Because
Mm-hmm.
they were at every game. It seemed like they
Right.
were videotaping every game and giving us an
Yeah.
update in the group chats, which is awesome. Can you talk about
Mm-hmm.
how much that helped you as well? Just, continue to stay mentally tough in the process and just knowing that you had that support.
Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, like throughout my entire life, my parents have been like that. Like they, the support that I have received from them and my siblings has been just incredible. Like honestly, it's amazing to know that you have people who have your back no matter what and just are proud of you no matter what you do. I think one thing that kind of definitely separates them from other like soccer parents that I've noticed is they've like never pressured me into anything. They've never, I don't know, they've never kind of been strict on the things that I should do. And I feel like giving me that free range to kind of do what I want to do and the support for me to have that free range, like it honestly, it just means so much because it's like I can figure out who I want to be by myself without anyone forcing me into anything. But they just, once I did choose, it was like, okay, like here we go. So they were just incredibly supportive, literally all the way through my life. And like, especially senior year, I think it's like the last hurrah. So you go in and you want to see everything. So I have so much respect for them sticking out in the cold and the rain and the snow and all the weather elements that you get from Illinois in the spring. It means so much because I don't know if anyone would have the strength to do that in a normal situation.
Yeah, well, I could definitely say I see that, I see their support too, and I think it's amazing that you get that. Obviously, it's great because it definitely makes everything a little bit easier when you're going through those high pressure environments, right? Trying to figure things out. So, with that being said, I want to say obviously thank you for coming on the pod. Uh,
Yeah.
this was a lot of fun. Great talking to you. And it was good to at least recap an incredible run that you had this year. Talk a little bit about just kind of the things you've learned and obviously the people that have helped you along the way. So thank you so much for taking time.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So for everyone listening, another episode of Shred's Takes with my cousin Charlotte Dellin of New Trier Soccer, and she'll be going to play soccer at Fairfield this upcoming season. So excited to have her closer by than usual.
Yeah.
And thank you guys for all listening, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.